listener production.
From the briefing team,
This is The Beefing.
Hey, it's Helen Smith here. Welcome to The Beefing. Today's beef is on Sydney versus Melbourne. Let's get into it. It's the battle between the two biggest cities in Australia and a feud that even fueled the birth of our capital in a bid to simmer the fighting of who deserved the top spot. Yeah, this beef between Sydney and Melbourne is the reason Canberra exists. When Australia became a federation in 1901, the beef really started, with Sydney arguing that they should be the capital as it was the quote-unquote oldest city. But Melbourne's counter-argument was that they already housed Parliament. And so, in a deal to keep the peace, neither was allowed to become the capital, and in comes Canberra in 1913. Under the terms of the agreement, the capital would sit a little closer to Sydney, but as a compromise, Melbourne would host Parliament until it was built. And from this little agreement, all of the cities started to form their own personality traits. Sydney for finance and media, Melbourne for manufacturing and culture, and Canberra, well, for politics. Now, side note, at the end of this episode, we want to know who you think won the feud, so get your arguments ready. With that said, the classic saying is that Sydney has the looks while Melbourne has the personality. Sydney-siders boast about their beautiful beaches and for being home to most of Australia's iconic tourist destinations, known worldwide like the Sydney Opera House and the Harbour Bridge, whereas Melburnians show off their art and foodie scene, including their claims to having the best coffee and the fact that you can actually afford to buy a house there, with the median house price in Melbourne sitting at around $1.06 million, which is about $658,000 less than Sydney's $1.72 million. A clear winner there if you're a first home buyer looking to enter the market, but if you already own a home in Sydney, you're laughing. Now, back in 2023, Melbourne actually took over Sydney as Australia's most populous city for the first time since the 19th century gold rush, officially becoming Australia's largest city because of a boundary change in the census. Now, side note, at one point during the 19th century, Melbourne was considered as one of the richest cities in the world. And when it comes to the layout of the cities, people often say that Melbourne is a grid and Sydney, well, wasn't planned out. And they'd be right, because it actually was planned out to be a grid, with Robert Hoddle's 1837 street layout known as the Hoddle Grid. Coming back to the 21st century, though, just this year, the prestigious Global Livability Index saw Melbourne taking out number 4 and Sydney not far behind, ranking in 6th place. Now, the list is created by the Economist Intelligence Unit, who ranks 173 cities across 5 key metrics: stability, healthcare, culture and environment, education and infrastructure. And it's been running for more than 2 decades. And both Melbourne and Sydney matched perfect scores for healthcare and education, 100 each, and also scored strong marks for stability and infrastructure. But when it came down to the culture and environment categories, Melbourne scored 95.8 compared to Sydney's 94.4. So while Melbourne beat Sydney again, it wasn't by much, but it's still a very good boasting point for Melburnians. But when it comes to the weather, both locations are very different, which has actually helped shape the culture and list of activities that each are known for. Sydney is known as more of an outdoor city with some of the world's best beaches, cliff-top walks and national parks, home to the Blue Mountains and even the location of Summer Bay, with Home and Away being shot just outside of the city along the northern beaches. But this does mean that when it rains, everyone forgets how to drive in Sydney. Whereas Melbourne, on the other hand, tends to experience 4 seasons in one day on the regular, which in turn has helped them create their impressive art and food scene, hence the personality comment earlier, with the National Gallery of Victoria being the oldest and most frequented gallery in the country. And now when it comes to sports, Melbourne and Sydney are footy rivals, with New South Wales and Sydney being known as a rugby league state, whereas Victoria and Melbourne are AFL fanatics. And this battle is pretty unique, not only between the two cities, but across the globe, as most nations only have one major football code, soccer. But us Aussies have 4: AFL, Rugby League or NRL, soccer and rugby union. Moving on to nightlife, another battleground between the two cities, with Visa's recent Nighttime Economy Index of Australian cities in September 2025 finding that Melbourne's inner city still holds the top spot for the country's best nighttime economy. But it's not as simple as it may seem because the next 6 spots on the list all go to areas in Sydney. So the argument that Sydney's nightlife is dead seems to be false according to this report. But when it comes to the types of bars and nightlife venues that the two have, Melbourne's tend to be more creative, whereas Sydney has the best rooftop bars, which again makes sense with the looks versus personality debate. But just this year, a new rivalry between the two cities has made it back into the headlines with the battle of Sydney's Metro and Melbourne's new CBD rail tunnel after it opened in November. So let's break it down. Sydney's Metro is 113 kilometres long with 29 new stations and 17 upgraded. And Melbourne's rail tunnel is 9 kilometres long with 5 stations. And both have copped a lot of criticism, with Melbourne bearing the brunt of it as it was sold as the biggest transformation of Melbourne's rail network in more than 40 years. And with only 5 stops, it seems a little underwhelming. Now, Sydney's trains boast that they're driverless with 3 rapid transit lines operating independently of each other and heavy rail, whereas Melbourne's are driver-operated trains and are an extension of existing heavy rail. As for the cost, well, Melbourne's new system cost around $15.5 billion, whereas Sydney's cost $67.3 billion, but that's also based on estimates for the final cost of uncompleted lines. Yes, there are more stops coming, with stations opening from 2019 all the way till 2032, whereas Melbourne's current project is complete with no more stops happening. So yes, Sydney's is costing a lot more, but it's a way bigger project. But they both have one thing in common, and it's that they have blown their budgets out of the water, with one transport researcher saying that Sydney went big and bold, Melbourne's was a sensible, targeted investment to improve the existing heavy rail. Overall, though, when it comes to who cares more about the beef between the two cities, the common thread online and across social media is that Melburnians throughout more insults, therefore, care more about the rivalry. Now, I know I have a clear winner for this beefing, but let us know who you think takes the top spot. But that's it for today's beefing on Sydney versus Melbourne. If you liked this episode, let us know. And while you're there, if you could subscribe or follow wherever you're listening from, it's a really easy way you can support everything we do here at The Briefing. And you can check us out on Instagram and YouTube at The Briefing Podcast. I'm Helen Smith. Catch you next time.